In our lesson for March the 29th, we're going to do the first of two lessons on Zechariah. We'll do the first lesson, and then we'll do a couple of lessons on Luke, and then we'll come back 3 weeks from now to a second lesson on Zechariah. The book of Zechariah, if you've noticed, if you've kind of thumbed through, is the longest of these minor prophets, and it's also the one most filled with visions and symbolic language. The other thing that's different about Zechariah is that we know specifically when he prophesied, because he tells us in the opening verse. It's in the 8th month of the 2nd year of Darius. Most of the ones we've talked about up to this point give us no date. We have to look for historical clues in the book to try to determine when the prophecy came. A lot of uncertainty about even that. But Zechariah leaves no question. He says it was in the 2nd year of the reign of Darius. Now that reign started in 520 BC, we know. So Zechariah prophesied, the first part of the prophecy comes in the year 518 BC. 518 BC. Zechariah and Haggai were contemporaries. We'll look at Haggai in a later lesson. And they pronounce some common themes. We see these in Zechariah. He wants to bring about spiritual renewal, revival, chapter 1, verses 2 through 3. He wants to inspire the people to complete the work on the kingdom, on the temple, chapter 1, verse 16, chapter 4, verse 7. And he wants to console and comfort the people, chapter 1, verses 12 through 13. All of these themes that we see in Zechariah, we'll also see in the book of Haggai. Now, in our lesson for today, what Zechariah is trying to do is to break the people free from their holding on to the past and longing for the past, to get them to face the reality of the present and grab onto the hope of the future. And he does that in chapter 8 around the theme of fasting. The people of Bethel, actually have to go back to chapter 7, the people of Bethel write to him, are called to him, to Zechariah, and they sent these two messengers, and they want to know, verse 3 of chapter 7, should I mourn and fast in the 5th month as I have done so for many years? In other words, they send to Zechariah trying to get some instruction on how they should carry out their fasts. Now, the fasts were times during the calendar year when the people would not eat, and they would focus their attention on something that had to do with God. And they're asking Zechariah, now that we're back in our land, how should we do these fasts? Zechariah responds basically in our text by saying, you don't need to do the fast at all, because the fasts have become basically pity parties. As you look to the past and moan about all the things that have happened, you need to move past that, he said, and face the reality of the present. So what is the reality of the present? Zechariah gives them 10 messages, beginning here in chapter 8, verse 1. And each of them preceded with the formula, again, the word of the Lord Almighty. Verse 3, this is what the Lord says. Verse 4, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Verse 6, this is what the Lord Almighty says. He does that 10 times now in chapter 8 and presents 10 messages to the people. Now let me walk through the first 5 because they're in our basic text, and then I'll summarize the last 5. The first one in verses 1